Demolition on the layout? It is so, but only a little bit. Hello everyone, welcome to the CB&Q and the C&NW in Wyoming. I'm Mark Pruitt, wangdoodle monitor. And no, that's not an obscenity. You want to know what a wangdoodle is? Read the video description. Today is December 3rd, 2022. This is layout update number 37. November was a different kind of a month. It involved some significant redesign on the layout and some demolition of a small part of the Cody branch that I'd already built, plus the reconstruction of that line. The redesign was the result of some new information that Dave gave me. I've talked about Dave before. He's the retired BNSF engineer who used to run trains on the line I model. Dave is the only model railroader in the entire town of Basin, Wyoming. Basin, Wyoming. You know, I wonder what it must be like to live in a town named after a bathroom fixture. I suppose it could be worse though. The name of the town could be Commode, Wyoming. And Dave is probably unsubscribing from the channel right now. Well, let's take a look at the shenanigans on the layout this past month. After my late October operating session, I did a bit of work on the scenery around Powder River. This is where we left that in the last update video. I continued working on the new static grass, adding it down the length of the hills behind the track and extending the grass in front of the track over to the Powder River turnout where a dirt road will be. Then I did a bit of work between the main line and siding, adding just a bit of grass and discoloring it to add the grime and such that would accumulate from the railroad. I still have a lot of work to do on it, but in the end it should look something like this. I went on to other work on the layout for most of the rest of the month, but at the end of November I came back to Powder River and added additional foliage and textures to part of the new grassy areas. Well, as I mentioned at the very end of last month's update and just a few minutes ago in this update, Dave, the guy who is currently unsubscribing from my channel and is probably blocking my cell number on his phone, told me of a major flaw in the concept for operating the layout that I developed. My operating concept was that all local trains on the line originate in Casper. Dave informed me that all the local trains that work the towns in the Bighorn Basin, and that's where the town of Basin's name actually came from, by the way, including Thermopolis, Worland, and the entire Cody branch, originated in Greybull. My goal with the layout is to represent, as best as is reasonably possible, the two railroads in central Wyoming that I model. This includes appropriate period equipment and, of course, operations. So I was rather dismayed to find out that my operations concept for the layout was so far off base. To more accurately represent how the Burlington operated in the Bighorn Basin would require some significant redesign of the layout. Fortunately, those parts of the layout that would need this redesign haven't been built yet. If they had been, I probably would have said, oh well, too late now, and just stayed with what I had. The next few minutes I'm going to talk about some of the redesign options I looked at, a traffic flow analysis I did to determine whether or not the redesign was a good idea, and that sort of thing. If you're not interested in that, just skip ahead to the time shown on the screen to see the rest of the construction during the month. Although Greybull's track work wasn't planned in detail yet, I do that for each town as I get to them during construction using Sanborn maps as guides, I did know where it was located in the general layout plan. So I started looking at options to add a yard to Greybull rather than leaving it as just another town with industries to switch. I came up with a few different arrangements for a yard in Greybull, running each one of them by Dave for his input. His knowledge of the real railroad, though decades after my modeled period, was very important in getting details right. One great example, I was a bit frustrated at not being able to find space for a drill track when Dave told me there never has been one in Greybull. They just use the main when making up the trains there. but there just wasn't room in Greybull for the yard I felt was necessary to build the local trains that will run over most of the layout. None of the planning I did gave me sufficient length tracks. I hit on the idea of moving Greybull over to the stairwall and combining it with the Frannie/Orrin yard. But I was worried that this might totally screw up traffic flow on the layout, since Frannie is the origin of the Cody branch and west staging, and Orrin is the origin of east staging. I needed to do some detailed traffic flow analyses to make sure I didn't get a really nasty surprise later on. Now, also keep in mind that while Frannie and Orrin are basically opposite ends of the same interchange yard, during operating sessions they would be treated as disconnected locations hundreds of miles apart. The first flowchart I built was the one for my original concept, where all local trains originate in Casper. I included all the major trains and color-coded them. We can ignore the C&NW trains, the orange bar, since they're not impacted at all by the potential operating concept change. The red bars represent trains coming from and going to staging. Some are through trains, stopping only in Casper for a motive power change and maybe the icing of reefers. That's the bottom red bar. And these are all Burlington trains, by the way. The other red bar represents trains coming from and going to staging that also have some work on the division, which will consist mostly of dropping off and picking up cuts of cars at Orrin, Casper, and Frannie. An occasional train of this type will probably also service the stock pens at Powder River. I mistakenly omitted the stop in Orrin on this bar. The purple bars represent trains originating in Casper. These might include tank car trains out of the Standard Oil Refinery going into staging either direction. The outer purple bar represents these trains. I mistakenly left out the stop in Orrin on this bar also. The inner purple bar with all the brakes represents the local train from Casper. The one heading to the left of Casper would be kind of boring. Its only work is to service the few industries in Douglas. The line going to the right represents two different locals, trains that will run direct to Frannie and then work the industries down the Cody branch, and the trains that will switch all the towns up to Frannie. One thing to note here, because of space limitations, trains going down the Cody branch would have to stop in Frannie and reverse direction to go forward down the branch. That meant turning the loco on a turntable at Frannie. This is a completely unprototypical move, but something I simply could not avoid. Here's the chart showing the train flows with Greybull originating the locals, with Greybull still in its original position just across the peninsula from Worland. No change to the C&NW, the orange bar, or to the Burlington trains represented by the bottom red bar. So far so good. The inner red bar is largely the same. According to Dave, trains that ran from Alliance, Nebraska to Laurel, Montana switched some of the small towns along their route. So I've added a stop for them at Douglas and eliminated the Casper to Douglas local. These trains also have an added stop at Greybull to pick up and drop off cuts of cars that worked the Bighorn Basin and Cody branches. The trains from Casper that go to east staging, the outer purple bar to the left of Casper, is unchanged except that I remembered to show the stop in Orrin. The trains that go to west staging now also stop to drop off and pick up cuts of cars in Greybull. There are no locals from Casper, so the inner purple bar is gone. In its place are blue bars representing the trains now originating in Greybull. The bar to the left represents the locals servicing Worland and Thermopolis, and to the right represents Cody branch trains. As you can see, there's still that very annoying but unavoidable reverse move that happens in Frannie. When I started looking at moving Greybull, there was only one reason to do it: the larger space I would have for the yard. But the flow analysis revealed two unforeseen and very compelling reasons to make the move. First, the space Greybull was in is now freed up for an additional town on the layout. I'd left Basin off the original plan for space reasons, but now I could put it back in. As you can see from the blue line to the left of Greybull/Frannie, that local now has 3 towns to service instead of just 2. The second reason is that with Greybull now a part of Frannie on the layout, the Cody branch trains can be built facing the proper direction. No more unprototypical reverse move. As far as all the other trains go, the Greybull and Frannie stops are now combined. Otherwise, no real impact. The upshot of all this was that moving Greybull opened up significant new operating possibilities without any real negative impacts. It was time to press on with the design changes. I set about designing the new combined Orrin, Greybull, Frannie area. It looks like this. The main line into Orrin is the blue line on the left, and the main into Frannie and Greybull is on the right. I have a decent amount of track length to build reasonable trains and sufficient storage to hold the cars that will need to be processed there. The new design was a go. While I was doing that redesign anyway, I took the time to completely rework the staging yards and the Cody branch. I hadn't been particularly happy with either of them, and this was the time to fix them. One of the things I did was move Powell from underneath Powder River to underneath Worland. This was enough of an improvement to warrant removing the small amount of construction I'd already done on the Cody branch. All in all, that huge redesign effort took a couple of weeks, but by mid-November I was ready to resume construction, so I began building the benchwork for Himes Curve. This will take the tracks all the way to the lift-out section on the right in this photo. As I progressed into the later part of November, I began installing sub-road bed on the new benchwork. The curve nearest the camera will connect to Basin on the left, while the center curve is the start of the Cody branch, and the one closest to the wall is west staging. The 2 more distant curves will be hidden by a bluff. The near curve is Himes Curve. As I said, redesigning the Cody branch meant demolishing what little of it I'd already built. I started by removing the track from the turnback curve at the free end of the peninsula. This will be replaced by a 1.5 turn helix that descends in the opposite direction. With that track removed, I cut the sub-road bed apart. There was no need to remove the track on the straight section, since I could simply move that to the other side of the peninsula and reuse it. I removed the straight section from the benchwork, then removed the risers. The next day, November 26th, I had the section repositioned and tied into the new sub-road bed leading to Greybull. By the end of the month, I cut some new cork road bed and installed it on the new sub-road bed. The other thing I did in late November was construct 3 new beet hoppers to service Holly Sugar. So here we are in the last month of the year. Was all that redesign effort worth it? Absolutely yes. Thanks to Dave's knowledge and insights, I'm much more satisfied with the layout design now than I have ever been. Thanks, Dave. In December, I plan to continue working on the Cody branch, which will involve reworking some of Worland's supporting risers to make room for Powell. I'll also continue working on Powder River, which may involve beginning construction of the stock pens there. Beyond that, I hope to have a couple of surprises to share in the January video. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next month.